Hello, everybody. My name is Nicholas Bush, and here we are in the Critique Corner, where we take everything that we've learned about the narrative paradigm and we challenge it. The first point of contention within the narrative paradigm is that Fisher was overly optimistic. Like Aristotle before him, he believed that everybody had the preference to everything that was naturally true and just. Barbara Warnick from the University of Pittsburgh also challenged Fisher by calling attention to the great communicative power of evil and wrong-headed stories. Take, for example, Adolf Hitler's Mein Kampf. This piece of literature struck a chord with alienated, disunited, and despairing people. Now, Fisher granted that evil could overwhelm our tendency to adopt good stories. However, he argues that's even more reason for us to identify and promote the humane values that are promoted in the narrative paradigm. Another challenger is Kevin McClure from the University of Rhode Island. Kevin thinks that Fisher's view of identification, the operating principle of the narrative rationality, is much too limited. McClure believes that not only should it apply to identification with characters in the story and their values, but it should also apply to groups that listeners identify with and the ideologies that these group members embrace. McClure references our textbook reference with the Catherine Ford and Brett Kavanaugh case to further his point, with Democrats on one side saying that they did believe Catherine Ford, and Republicans who held the majority saying that they did not. And as Brett Kavanaugh sits on the Supreme Court today, we can see how that turned out. Now, had Republican senators ended up voting against Kavanaugh's appointment after hearing Ford's story, McClure would have said that the powerful process of disidentification would be unleashed, requiring people to reconsider their social and political identities. And if you know anything about politics, seeing them shift sides is rare, to say the least. The narrative paradigm doesn't take into account the highly ego-involved members of these groups and the groups as a whole who may hold strong stances regardless of the points that they hear in stories that they listen to. As the book states, reform of society is not part of this theory's agenda. So to wrap up this critique corner, while people like Fisher and Aristotle argue that we have the tendency to prefer the true and just, it seems like it just might be optimism. Like Barbara stated earlier, he overlooks the possibility that people can use their storytelling for evil just as much as they can use it for good. The assumption that everybody wants what's best just isn't true. My other major takeaway is that Fisher also excludes the egos of these groups, like the Kavanaugh case. You see Republicans have a strong stance and they refuse to budge from it, regardless if they actually believe it or not. And while Fisher's narrative paradigm may be tailored to individual stories and it could be applicable to those individual stories, when you apply it to a group setting, especially a political setting, like the book references, sometimes it just doesn't pan out the same way as expected.